There's a lot of movies to talk about.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Dissecting Fiction podcast. I'm Vinny Murphy.
I'm Christiaan Cutlick.
And today we're going to take on another topic that's probably a little too much to do in an article.
It's, 20 movies at this point?
You know what? That's probably something I should have counted when I was doing the research, but at this point, we've seen so many of them. Does it really matter, the number?
No. And movies. Oh, not just movies, and TV shows.
Yes, that's true. TV shows, which we will be leaving out today, I think. We might mention a couple things, but we're going to talk about the MCU.
The Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Ooh. Going into Endgame, it's kind of important to look back at all this. This would be sort of the equivalent of if every James Bond movie was leading to one movie.
They tried that sort of with Spectre, and then nobody really liked it.
And yeah, they tried it a little bit at different... Actually, a little bit of a sidetrack here. With James Bond, they kind of tried every few movies.
To make a big storyline, yeah.
Yeah, and initially you really do get one, but nothing has ever been this prolific.
All-encompassing, really.
Yeah, and ended up leading to one movie. And I wanna pat ourselves on the back here. On the last podcast, we talked about how they have the phases that they decided were part of this, and we said that it really was just one big phase. There was no real delineation between the phases.
Well, now that's kind of become the case.
Yeah, they made that canon. They've decided this is called the Infinity Saga.
Oh, really? I didn't hear about
that's a new thing. That I think they probably just want to release some box sets or something.
Well, I remember the Phase 1 box sets, but we'll get into that a little bit later on.
So anyway, we are almost 15 years out from the inception of Marvel Studios as an independent unit, not just a label slapped on the front of other people's movies.
To begin with it, this was all announced initially in 2006.
I think there's even a little bit in 2005. I think the studio is established. They don't announce much as far as films until 2006.
But I think the context this whole cinematic universe emerged from is interesting, because this was kind of Marvel post-bankruptcy, and they kind of just got back all the finances. And they risked it all on a movie studio, essentially.
I think what we don't even think of as much anymore is they were doing it with characters that weren't their most well-known, I would say, outside of the Hulk.
And Captain America.
I don't even think Captain America was too big of a pop culture deal, though, at that point. I would suspect many people didn't know about the character.
They knew of him as a concept, I would say. But they would not know him as Steve Rogers. They just know him as, Captain America.
Right, and at this point, Spider-Man is firmly at Sony. The X-Men are at Fox, doing really well. And those were kind of your biggest Marvel characters they didn't have any access to.
To explain what happened is that this goes all the way back to, the 90s big comic crash that Marvel sort of caused. And Marvel basically sold off a bunch of licenses in the 90s. And that's how we got Spider-Man winding up at Sony and X-Men winding up with Fox. And that was basically to get back money from having no money.
Stan Lee had tried to do that in the 80s and had gotten a few things licensed. You've seen a few of those movies, probably the direct-to-video Captain America, that was, I think, 21st Century Films, which came out of Canon.
Mm-hmm.
Canon was supposed to do a Spider-Man movie. And there's all sorts of little things that almost happened sort of in that space in between the Incredible Hulk show and the 90s. That could be an entire show in itself, so we'll leave that. But it just didn't take hold until Marvel Studios, I would say Disney-fied it, but it was a little pre-Disney. But you know what? They still kind of treated it like Disney treats their properties initially.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth to note that Kevin Feige is from Disney. He did work at Disney for quite a while before he came over to Marvel. This was a huge risk at the time. And this was basically Marvel's entire finances in this studio, and they were risking it on characters like Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America. When they initially announced it at Comic-Con 2006, and this was even before Comic-Con was the big, cultural event They announced initially with Ant-Man, The Incredible Hulk, and Iron Man, and none of those, at the time, were A-list characters. At best, they were C-list.
Right, and I think what's interesting is if you look at that initial run, they haven't really changed direction much, but it's very clear when you see that they're moving towards Avengers, if you're going to bother doing Ant-Man.
Yeah, I mean, this is closely resembling the original Avengers lineup in, like, the very first issue.
And it's also bolstered because when they start announcing more, the next three they announce are Captain America, which happens, Thor, which happens, and then the sort of Nick Fury S.H.I.E.L.D. movie that never really happened.
Ant-Man was supposed to be the first one, I believe, right?
From what I've read, Iron Man was always sort of the initial anchor. The rights are still, to this day, sort of locked up at Universal for Hulk. But they wanted the Hulk movie out because Hulk was super recognizable. Hulk was the one that they knew people would know.
Yeah, they had, what was it, Ang Lee. He directed the 2003 Hulk movie, which was it's a really weird movie. It's actually kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's much more interesting to watch now that it's not the only Hulk movie. But they wanted to do another Hulk movie in continuity to kind of back up Iron Man, which was their flagship. The cool thing about that era, and I found this in a British site, they mention Black Panther, Doctor Strange, Hawkeye, Shang-Chi, and the Power Pack as other things that are already in development. This is like 2005, 2006.
Yeah.
So if you think that they're like really taking harsh turns in direction, I don't think they are.
It seems like they had like a general idea of what they wanted from all these, but like the ideas morphed over time to fit with audience perception.
Definitely, I would agree with that. But I think it's interesting that, you know, like this Dark Horse character Shang-Chi gets announced as coming out as a film, and if any of us were paying attention, they already talked about that over 10 years ago.
Of course, this was all off the back of like the X-Men and Spider-Man movies, which were massive at the time. Interesting, I find the most interesting thing is that like Marvel kind of started this trend of making these storylines stretch across multiple movies, but that was really started with like X-Men, like X-Men 1 and 2.
Yeah, I mean, you got it to a lesser extent with Superman. I think Superman's a strong example. The Tim Burton produced Batman movies weren't super tied together.
No.
There was enough where if you had seen the other ones, you kind of had the starter information, it made sense. But even like the shift from Batman to Batman Returns is pretty drastic. And I don't think anything was even close except for Superman.
This is all announced initially, and people are kind of interested. I mean, this is before superheroes are massive. I mean, you had Spider-Man and X-Men, but they weren't the genre they were known as today.
Right, the genre hadn't taken hold.
And then in 2008, May 2nd, 2008, they released Iron Man. There was more risk involved with that, in that they got John Ferrari. I probably said his name very, very wrong.
Favreau.
Jon Favreau, who's an up-and-coming director at this point.
Yeah, I think he had just come off of Elf.
Yes.
If I remember correctly, but he had done Swingers and Made, so he had a good reputation as far as directing really dialogue-heavy, kind of snarky characters. And enter Tony Stark.
Yeah, and then that's the other angle of this, is that to play Tony Stark, they got Robert Downey Jr., who was fresh off of a cocaine bender.
Yeah, he was fresh off of things Disney would not allow.
To put it simply, he had a big, massive drug addiction in the mid-2000s, and he went to rehab, and this is going to be his big comeback film.
This is a weird thing that sticks in my head, but I remember it being true, is he was supposed to have a really big comeback in the late 90s. It ended up on Ally McBeal. And then I believe that somehow got messed up.
The point is that Robert Downey Jr. had tried to do comebacks before, but he fell down a drug hole, and multiple times. So for Marvel to get their flagship character to be played by an ex-drug addict is kind of fascinating. And he makes the character, Robert Downey makes Iron Man an international icon.
Right, and what's interesting about it is Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man is not really the Iron Man that existed before that.
No.
You had Tony Stark, which was kind of an arrogant prick, and he was an alcoholic. but you didn't really have that sort of like snarkiness. That cutting dialogue wasn't really Iron Man's thing at that point. That became a product of the film. And I think there's so many parallels between Iron Man and Batman. And I think base story, it's, rich guy decides he's going to do good and not kill people, though Iron Man kills lots of people. So does movie Batman, so it works out. But
that's not canon.
Iron Man needed something to distance him from the other superheroes. And I think that sort of adult snarkiness. He wasn't Spider-Man. He wasn't like a kid making fun of the villains. He was this guy who, in the suit and out of the suit, was that cutting. Mm-hmm. I think that made a huge difference. I think it gave people something to hold on to with the character.
It's interesting to go back. I watched Iron Man pretty recently because I was going to do another podcast about the Marvel movies. And when I watched Iron Man, what stuck out to me is that Iron Man is very, 2000s. And that is kind of political because there's a lot about the Iraq War, which is hot back then.
Right.
That's very condescending. But Iron Man came out during a bunch of these, military controversies with, Blackwater being a military contractor that was hired by the U.S. government to basically go and build up Iraq after, blowing it up. And that was kind of what Iron Man was about.
Right. It was stuff that was in the news. We were, the public was very cognizant of arms dealers and these military outfits and terrorism. The idea of these groups out, in the Middle East who we didn't know a lot about and we couldn't find. And it all plays off of that.
And that's really kind of the most interesting part about the Iron Man, at least the first one, is that it does play off of all these very, cutting-edge trends and everything. And it finds something really interesting in all of that, too, because it does try to redeem Tony Stark a bit. We'll get into a little bit later on what happens with his character arc. My only problem is that it doesn't really condemn Tony Stark enough, because now it looks kind of gauche. We're supposed to be rooting for this arms dealer, this guy that kind of killed a bunch of people, but now he's good.
Well, that's the thing, is you have to... I think there's a point in that is that he was this guy who really didn't give a shit. And then by the end of the movie, he's a guy who gives a shit, but he's still kind of a dick. And that's where you leave him, and that's okay because you're still in movie one. As we were saying, this is all playing off of at the time, very contemporary themes, which is in many ways Marvel's strength. They've always portrayed themselves as the hip company. DC has been about legacy, has been about tradition in a sense. The sort of primordial superhero, this idea of where does the gods, this pantheon, the Justice League. Marvel was always counter to that, and that's exactly the move they played going up against The Dark Knight in 2008.
Iron Man and The Dark Knight came out the same year.
And I think I wrote about this in one of the articles. I remember having the thought of, man, I wish Iron Man had come out in a different year because I think it would have been huge. And really thinking that this could really have been a lot bigger without The Dark Knight to contend with. I guess I was right, kind of.
Kind of. I mean, and then from then on, Iron Man and The Dark Knight kick off, this superhero genre revival. The other interesting thing about Iron Man is that Jon Favreau puts in a lot of Easter eggs in his movies. And this is before even they had a solid idea of what they wanted the storylines to be. They had a vague idea. But they were kind of putting in Easter eggs for comic fans, which is unheard of at that point. Most of the films went to great lengths to explain who characters were. But Jon Favreau and Iron Man just kind of would drop in characters, name them, and then move on.
And he also had, he did, fun things, it's the same pizza place from Spider-Man 2 is the pizza place that Obadiah Stane brings the pizza back from.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a lot of, little things because they had already sort of started talking to Sony. You're pointing out something really valid about what the Marvel movies start doing immediately, is they give fans recognizable things to look for. Nolan wasn't doing that. Nolan was burying things in the movies and thinking people will figure this out eventually. This was a different thing. This was an affirmation that this is what you think it is.
Yeah.
You're not going to get Batman and Robin here. You're going to get something closer to the comics, which we'll continue to talk about too, because I don't know how true that ends up. At the time, it was a sign of good faith. They were just telling you hey, this is what you want it to be.
Jon Favreau also starts the Easter egg, like, at the end of the film, the stinger.
Yup, the first stinger where we get to see Nick Fury
start the Avengers initiative. And people were like, what's the Avengers?
Yeah, people were like, what's the Avengers?
And he went online to find out what the Avengers was.
Why is that guy missing an eye?
And I think that's also what helped make Marvel so successful, was the internet, because people could just go online and like, who's this character, who's that character?
That culture was already starting around 2008. That sort of like convention culture, like this fandom obsession thing was beginning with or without the movies. But the movies played into it so well that they kind of strengthened each other.
Yeah, and that's all because of Jon Favreau, because he was a huge fan of these comics. I mean, he really wanted to build out this universe, and he had some pushback from one of the owners of Marvel, but Kevin Feige, who was at this point not the head of Marvel Studios, really allowed him to play on that.
So next, we get a month later, which I think is interesting.
It's weird.
It is very weird, but it probably has more to do with Universal's release schedule than anything else. We get The Incredible Hulk. The Incredible Hulk is an interesting one. I actually really like it, and I really liked it when I saw it.
I remember liking it. I haven't watched it since then.
If there is a single movie in all of the Marvel movies that gets 90% ignored, it's The Incredible Hulk.
I really like the opening scene where like they're trying to catch the Hulk in that warehouse. That's a really cool scene.
So you have Edward Norton playing the Hulk here, the only time Edward Norton will play the Hulk.
It did play into the Hulk movie from 2003. This movie, more than Iron Man, assumed people knew who the Hulk was. It didn't get big into his origin. It was more about Bruce Banner finding the cure than anything else.
Right, and his relationship with Betty. And you get a fight, a really cool fight in Harlem with the Abomination, played by Tim Roth, which is like the coolest thing that no one talks about, that Tim Roth played the Abomination. And then Thunderbolt Ross is there, and he shows up later. And that's really kind of the only impact that movie has, which is weird.
And then after that, 2 years later...
Which is insane now.
Yeah.
That you'd have to wait 2 years. You're waiting 2 years for the next Marvel movie. You usually have to wait like 3 days. And that's only if you didn't get the advanced screening.
Yeah, these several advanced screenings.
Yeah, several advanced screenings. I'm going to tell you what I remember hearing the plan was before we get to Iron Man 2. I read a lot. And I used to read a lot of interviews, and half of these interviews I cannot find anymore, and half of these articles I read are gone.
The mouse.
I'd have to go back in like the Wayback Machine.
Yeah.
Apparently, at this point, they had almost kind of put themselves in a bit of a corner, because they had really teased the Avengers thing both at the end of Iron Man and Incredible Hulk. Supposedly, the original concept for where Avengers was going to be a lot closer to the Ultimates. Meaning it would basically be the Avengers chasing the Hulk until they probably realize like the Hulk is good or something. Which is supposedly why Stark visits Thunderbolt Ross, because he's trying to recruit the Abomination into the Avengers initiative, and then you're going to find out the Abomination is bad. They also established that the leader is out there.
Right,
in The Incredible Hulk, which is another thing that gets completely ignored. And I remember hearing this whole thing that, like, Norton, first of all, was already pissed because they didn't go with his rewrites on Incredible Hulk. And he also felt like they had no idea what they were doing because they didn't really have a plan yet.
Yeah, it's funny to see, like, Robert Downey Jr. and Edward Norton were both known as, like, great character actors, but Robert Downey's now infamously hates doing indie movies, and Edward Norton famously loves doing indie movies. And it's kind of interesting, they were friends too. The rumor I heard is that Edward Norton only did this because Robert Downey asked him to.
Yeah, I remember hearing stuff to that effect too, but like, I guess just at the end of this, they knew they had to get to Avengers. Didn't quite know what they were doing, because no one had really done that. No one had built superhero movies and the idea that they were all going to team up.
Well, with, like, recurring characters and everything, too, like, you would have to see Iron Man to kind of get the full context for, like, Iron Man 2, and, like, even for The Incredible Hulk. This wasn't being done anywhere.
We're now in May 7th, 2010. Iron Man 2 comes out. It's supposed to be taking place at the same time as Incredible Hulk, which is established within the movie. Which is good because they give themselves, like, a little time to play with. I thought that was a smart idea. What's not smart is a lot of the construction of this movie, because it seems like all they're trying to do the entire movie is establish that there's more characters out there.
This movie, I remember, is for kind of introducing Scarlett Johansson to the world. I remember all the trailers and everything showed off Scarlett Johansson in that like leather bodysuit and everything.
Yeah.
That was kind of what this movie was known for. And then also for Mickey Rourke being half nude most of the time with that Whiplash costume.
Yeah, and like we were saying, like Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk were trying to show that they were going to be sort of more like the comics then. Then Iron Man 2 introduces like a very young American Black Widow and combines Crimson Dynamo and Whiplash into one character. And it starts to get like, okay, maybe we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing here.
This is kind of where the plans start to fall apart a bit. And, like, Marvel was still taking risk on, like, actors and everything. Like, Scarlett Johansson wasn't known. Mickey Rourke was kind of infamously crazy. Like, he was just off The Wrestler at this point.
Right.
So they were kind of betting a lot of their bets on, like, these indie actors. Kind of well-known character actors at this point.
I think it pays off ultimately.
Yeah, but it's just later down the line, I think it's kind of interesting to see they pick much more conventional actors down the line.
They also have more movies to cast.
That's true, too.
Yeah. Iron Man wins every fight in Iron Man 2, which is another problem. Iron Man is never threatened. It's just Iron Man wisecracking and having cool suits, which, you know what, is better than some movies.
Whiplash gets defeated 3 times.
Yeah, it's literally this just like, okay, all right, I mean, that looked cool.
And they show Iron Machine, that's the other thing.
War Machine.
War Machine.
Never forget, that's what sold me on the movie. I like my War Machine. Big ForceWorks fan. So you get to the end of Iron Man 2, and we have a year gap.
Which is, again, insane.
Yeah, there was only one Marvel movie in 2010. Like, remember that. Think about it.
Internalize it.
Yeah, just let that seep through everything. Which I don't think is at all an accident. They were clearly sort of struggling to figure out what they were doing. Yeah. We still haven't seen Ant-Man, which was announced.
We'll get into that, because there's a lot of problems with that.
Yeah. Problems maybe tied to that idea you were talking about of going with more artistically sound.
They wanted more commercial people later on.
In 2011, get the first signs that we're not just going to play with the military-industrial complex for this entire film company. Thor. From Kenneth Branagh, with many writers on the script, which is generally how this works.
For those that don't know, most movie studios will have like 10 writers on a... They'll have at least 4 credited writers usually, but there's usually 10 writers in totals, because what movie studios like to do is that they'll get the first draft, they'll hand it off to another writer, and then they have to get handed off to another writer, until they get something they like. And then only the last 4 drafts of a script get credited.
I think Thor is good. I think Branagh pulls it off. He's got a great cast.
I think it was more elevated by the cast than anything else.
Yeah, but you know what? That's a hard concept to throw into the middle of all this.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's kind of the best aspect of Thor, even as a character at this point, is like somehow you got to the end of that movie and nothing felt too wrong.
Well, I guess my problem with Thor is that it didn't felt wacky enough, or like... Because when I think of Asgard, I wanted it to be more crazy, which they do in Thor Ragnarok.
Right.
Which is what I appreciate more in Thor Ragnarok. But here they kind of try to keep it grounded. They play more that Asgard is science than anything else. You know, the idea that any science sophisticated enough will look like magic.
Right.
And that's what they try to play Odin and Thor as.
Which I think is fair, because it's a very Kirby-an idea. Yeah. You know, New Gods, Eternals, all kind of played these, like, God engine type things, where everything seemed, it all seemed to be, like, just weird God tech. And it functions. I think it was a smart move, and I think it's really, you know, the only way to kind of get that character into the mix at this point. Yeah. Because really all you have is the Hulk and Iron Man, and the Hulk and Iron Man are both military characters the way they play them. Right after that comes Captain America. Which goes straight back to the military complex, but I think it does it in an interesting way, because it plays more like The Rocketeer from Disney. Yeah, because it's directed by Joe Johnston, who directed The Rocketeer. Well, yeah. Rocketeer is a great movie. Watch it. The thing I like the most about Captain America, it's something that I don't think there is an equivalent outside of something that you may disagree with later on in this conversation, but we'll leave that for then. I think Captain America is the only sort of Superman-ish movie. Like, it's the only very pure superhero movie. What really drew to this movie is, like, how idealistic it is, because what I really like is when Chris Evans, like, trying to
sign up for the army. He's like, oh, why do you want to sign up? Do you want to defend your country? Blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, I just don't like bullies. And like, that's such like a sincere line that you can't help but like Chris Evans. And he plays it so well, too.
And it's grounded in that. I'm a huge Captain America fan, like, in all platforms. Captain America is, like, one of my favorite characters. And when Captain America's written right, it's like not Superman, about patriotism. It's about justice and this idea that that's what the United States should stand for.
Yeah.
Joe Johnston ingrained that so much in the portrayal in the first movie that it isn't going to go away. And it never feels wrong. It never feels like this is like some weird nationalistic thing.
No.
It feels like this is the right guy in the right position, and that's who you would want to represent America.
Well, even like them giving all this power to the scrawny dude, it just feels right. Like that's the right thing you should do, and this is the right person.
And this is also about the time, from what my research has provided, that you have Whedon coming in.
Oh, yeah.
Starting to really work on the scripts, get things in there. I think a little bit on Thor. I think that's how Hawkeye ends up there.
I'm pretty sure that is how. And I think he helped with a lot of the, world building. This is where we see a lot more concrete world building instead of just throwing stuff at the wall.
Though it does have my favorite Easter egg of any of the movies. The World War II Human Torch at the World's Fair in his tube. Yeah. Which presumably he breaks out of later if we're going by Marvel's. Captain America the First Avenger really leaves the Marvel Universe in a good place. It kind of cleans up the messes of Iron Man 2. You start to feel more confident that this is going to be sort of driven in a comic book direction, which is precisely what they needed before the Avengers. And that's next.
For the Avengers, I was in college at the time, and I was part of the Joss Whedon fan club.
Ooh.
And I remember people literally fighting over these tickets, because at this point, it's been 4 years, and these have been building over a fever pitch.
Which at the time was like the longest build to anything like this. No one knew what to do with it.
No one, this was unheard of to be like, we're definitely making the Avengers 4 years from now. And people are like, what do you mean? Like, you just, what if you just cancel it? They're like, we're not going to cancel it. But they canceled X-Men 4.
That is true. It did change the sort of mentality of like, we're a little more trusting now in things being announced, because in the late 90s, I read 100 superhero movie announcents that never happened.
They're gonna make that Cerebus movie one day.
Yeah, they're gonna, Cameron's making Spider-Man. Watch out.
Savage Dragon, here
Savage Dragon. That could be an entire hour-and-a-half podcast just rattling off things that didn't happen. But now, we're at this point, there's a trailer. I saw the Hulk standing next to Iron Man.
Which was crazy to think the only other thing that did this was Universal and monster movies. And even back then, that was kind of considered, kitschy. You know, they're just putting these characters together to, sell a few more tickets.
Right.
Here was, an actual storyline that was built up to.
And so we get to Avengers, and Avengers is, it's good.
It's good, yeah. The Avengers is really, really good. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. I don't think it stands up well on second watches. But
no, absolutely not. And I think the reason, though, is it's a double-edged sword, what Whedon had to do.
Yeah.
He had to explain Hawkeye. He had to fix Black Widow. He had to bring her closer to the character, because the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent we got in Iron Man 2 was just some S.H.I.E.L.D. agent.
She was just hot. That was really her.
Right, that was her gimmick. She was the hot girl in the leather suit, which was what they put on the poster.
Yeah.
He has to do a lot of work that the second time is boring, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Because you know who the characters are by the end of the movie, and when you go back to the beginning of the movie, there's no reason to rewatch it.
No, there's some cool fight scenes, like the fight scene in Manhattan's interesting. I mean, it
I think
suffers
the Hulk,
a lot from...
Hulk on the helicarrier.
Yeah, the Hulk on the helicarrier fight is really cool. It suffers a lot from Joss Whedon's more TV directing, in that it's not as sweeping as what we get later on with, Winter Soldier and things like that.
Right.
But it is a very good movie, and I remember watching it in the theaters and everything, too. I was kind of, blown away.
Right, especially as a comic book fan, getting to see any of that at that point was insane.
Yeah.
It just didn't seem like you would ever see a movie like that. You were happy to have stuff that was getting closer to the material, that kind of got the tone better, which is where a lot of superhero movies earlier kind of slipped up, was not really understanding the characters. And then you get this, and it's really cool. And, like, that first time, yeah, I was, like, overjoyed. And the tag on that brings us Thanos.
Yeah, which is...
Or the Big Purple Man, as most people called him at the time.
I remember people, like, rushing to the internet. It's like, who's that guy at the end that yelled at Loki? And they're like, oh, it's Thanos. What does Thanos do? Oh, he tries to sleep with death. And I'm like, what do you mean?
You see, he courts death. You remember? He said that. I remember just distinctly going on Google, like, the next day and seeing who was the Purple Man at the end of Avengers. Like, as, like, written out in front of me, and I'm just like, oh, the world has changed.
And this, which is crazy to think about now, that people don't know who Thanos is.
Well, now he's, like, the biggest, like, movie villain in the last decade.
Next to, like, Joker or something.
Yeah, I think he's comparable to that at this point.
But, like, here, like, people did not know who this guy was.
And he also did nothing in the movie. He was just some dude who showed up at the end and, like, that weird guy talked to him. And,
like, people didn't know what the Infinity Stones were or anything. Right. Like, that was all a foreign concept, and Joss Whedon helped usher that in. And then we get into what Marvel called Phase 2, which was, at the time, they liked to kind of block off movies by, like, one big tentpole. So, like, Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Thor, all led up to Avengers.
Right.
So Phase 2, all these movies would lead up to one big movie, which
Ant-Man.
is yeah.
Which was the last movie in Phase 2, according to this list.
It was supposed to be Age of Ultron.
Right.
But it wound up being Ant-Man for various reasons.
We'll get there in a minute.
And then also at the same time, they start developing TV shows, like kind of the now originally infamous Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which Joss Whedon kept hopping in and out of. He was kind of being torn by multiple projects at this point.
Yeah, I remember, and this is another one where I wish I really had it written down. I read an interview with Whedon at the time, and remember Whedon leaves shortly after Age of Ultron. It was pitched to him differently than it was, and he wasn't incredibly happy with how limited it had to be for television, because he was not pitched on that idea.
Well, they gave him big budget, but like they
wanted for a few episodes.
Yeah, then they wanted all these weird restrictions on it and everything.
So Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. starts off seeming like it's going to be extremely important to all of this, and I don't think you have to watch any of it to understand anything that happens.
Some of it ties into the movies. We'll get there. Phase 2, so we have Avengers, they start making Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., things like that. And then a year later, almost on the dot, we get Iron Man 3, which kicks off Phase 2, the next block of Marvel movies.
So let's talk about Iron Man 3, because this is where I get a little saucy.
I like it conceptually, because I like the idea of Iron Man, like, getting rid of the Iron Man persona. And just being himself, like him admitting that he is Iron Man and Iron Man is him.
I think that's okay. I don't have a problem with that at all.
But at the end, it ends in an Iron Man fight where he makes 1 million Iron Mans and they all fight a giant Iron Man dude. And it's just so thematically against itself. Because like at the end he says, I would never make an Iron Man.
That's another one where Shane Black, who I was extremely excited to see work in an Iron Man movie because I love Shane Black.
Yeah.
And we know he could work well with Robert Downey Jr. because of Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Like, it just seemed like the perfect choice. He's talked about how restricted he got, and it seems like this period, like Phase 2, I guess because of the success of Avengers, they were kind of trying to manipulate the scripts a little more than they had earlier.
There's a lot of micromanaging, and this is also where Disney begins to emerge into the picture.
It's not fair to blame my overwhelming dislike for Iron Man 3 on Shane Black. But I can't get over... It's almost less logical than Iron Man 2 was. It's this idea where you have this character, you just established all this stuff, you finally got him on the Avengers. Suddenly, there's a terrorist who, in all honesty, is not the biggest threat in the world after what we just experienced, and no one is helping him. Like, there's no intervention of it. This should be like, they just fought giant dragons flying into Manhattan.
It's slowly coming back to me now.
They defeated a god leading dragons destroying Manhattan with an army of monsters. And now there's a guy with a helicopter, and he's too hard to stop.
Yeah, I mean, I could kind of see this if they played it off as, like, Tony Stark is just, like, obsessing over this guy for whatever reason.
Right.
But that's not what winds up happening.
It's not what's on screen.
No.
If this was a movie about Tony Stark not wanting to cooperate with people,
it would have been fine.
It would have been... It maybe would have been fine. But it's just this mess, and it's like they try to shoehorn the Iron Patriot thing in.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of weirdness in this movie, and I think it's something that bothers me watching them to this day, that they just were like, oh, actually Tony Stark can just fix himself and can take the thing out of his chest.
Well, that was what was annoying. It's because it's supposed to end with Iron Man swearing to never make a weapon again, and then in Age of Ultron he makes 1 million weapons.
It's just a pretty useless movie in all of this. I think it gets referred back to a little more than Incredible Hulk, but not much more.
No, I think it just plays more in Tony Stark's character in just Age of Ultron, but the other thing that this movie was infamous for was what it did with the Mandarin, in that the Mandarin was not a villain all along. It was secretly a puppet for Extremis. Extremis.
Which was part of AIM, which also kind of gets a little wasted in this.
Yeah.
But that's something that can be fixed. In the future. We have a lot to go.
Yeah. So this is where they start ramping up how many movies to start releasing, because 6 months later, almost on the dot again, they have Thor the Dark World, which is all you can say about Thor the Dark World.
It's like, hey, that happened.
wait, that's it.
But Thor the Dark World becomes pretty important because it introduces the first, I think, named Infinity Gem, right? That's the first time they really kind of show that that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
After seeing an Infinity Gauntlet in Thor.
In the background.
Yeah, no, Thor Dark World is, you can watch it.
Thor the Dark World is, you can watch it. And they introduce the Infinity Gems and some of Thor's cast, which all get promptly forgotten.
Yeah, which I'm a little thankful for. I don't mind Jane.
No, but she gets kind of written out because Natalie Portman considers herself too good for these movies.
Can you confirm that? Is she going to listen to this and be really pissed?
I don't know. I don't care.
She was Amidala.
6 months later, Thor's forgotten. And Captain America, the Winter Soldier, which is kind of firmly establishes Marvel as like a prestige brand, I think.
I agree. I think 2014 is the year that it's going to kind of keep going. Captain America, the Winter Soldier is, in my opinion, as far as the overall narrative goes, and this is going to sound silly considering that we're now talking about a giant space alien man who snaps his fingers and kills everyone. I think Captain America, Winter Soldier is the most important movie as far as starting where Marvel goes.
Yeah, it legitimizes the brand, because before this, people did not think this was going to last.
Right.
They thought Avengers was the peak, that's it, it's going to burn itself out. How could they keep doing this? But then Winter Soldier comes along, and it builds off of everything before it, really.
Right, and I also think, to me, the most important thing Winter Soldier does is it does what comic books, when they're written right, have done for years, which is takes the character, and instead of trying to change the character, it changes their environment and shows how strong the character is. Captain America from the first Avenger doesn't go away into the Winter Soldier.
No.
He's dropped into a different scenario. He's now like a spy. He's fighting, like Hydra and like all these things that come out of them, and his best friends got turned into a killing machine by the Russians. It's all nuts. But Captain America doesn't have to change to work in that environment. And it also does a lot to strengthen Black Widow because it's a movie where she finally gets to be a spy.
And they go rogue, too.
Right.
And they bring in some more of the wacky stuff that I like. Like, they have Armin Zola there as a supercomputer. All the Hydra agents there. And they don't try to downplay that like they would do in Thor, not 3 years before it. And they actually play into it a lot more now.
Winter Soldier really changes the game. I think in a lot of ways is what's going to save Iron Man from Iron Man 2 and 3.
This is his own world now.
Right.
Like, this is Marvel's own world. They're not trying to base things off the headlines like they did with Iron Man, like what they did with the Hulk. Winter Soldier makes Marvel its own universe.
Yeah, they have their own terrorists. They have, their own problems. A few months later than that, after they establish their own world, we go off-world.
Into Guardians of the Galaxy, which was, again, another big risk at this point. Because, people did not know Guardians of the Galaxy. People thought space stuff was dead.
And it's really funny. I remember Shout out to my friend Bob.
Shout outs to Bob.
Shout out to Bob. We left Guardians of the Galaxy, and he said that was the best Star Wars movie he'd seen in years.
That was the opinion.
Right.
Not a few years later, Disney buys Star Wars. Also, we've kind of neglected to mention that Disney has bought Marvel at this point. They kind of bought them back in 2013.
Yeah, we talked a little bit. Going into Phase 2 is really when the Disney style of film production starts to play into this a little bit. Where we were talking about the meddling and everything, but also the ability to have that much money.
This is kind of where they let their hands off the wheel.
Right.
And they say Marvel knows what they're doing, you can't interfere with this stuff. And Guardians of the Galaxy becomes a huge success.
What's interesting is I actually wrote over on Den of Geek years ago. I wrote an article that pretends to be an article about Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, the cartoon, which, by the way, I do love.
That's a good movie. Show. Wow. That's a good show.
I wrote an article about that, but what I ended up doing is a ton of research on this sort of phase, if you will, and a lot of the origins of these scripts. And one of the most fascinating things about this is the evolution from sort of Nicole Perlman's script to James Gunn's script.
Which is an illegal battle in itself.
Right, there's a whole thing about that. Perlman was she was literally in a writer's combine. They had given these writers characters that they had 100% locked down and were like, all right, give me a concept. And sort of Guardians got through because of that. But you can see where they knew they were going because Guardians show up in Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Yeah. Like, they knew what characters they were going to play with. Gunn changed the game when he took the script and made it into something very different.
He made it his own movie. Because he adds all this music into it. That's kind of what made the movie so popular. Is like he adds all this 80s music into it. This is at the height of the 80s craze, which, to go back about like Disney having all these 100% lockdown characters, this is also where we see Disney trying to buy back rights for the characters Marvel lost in the late 90s during the bankruptcy and everything.
Yeah, you start to see a little bit of negotiation. It's around this time too that we get Amazing Spider-Man, right?
Yeah.
And if you kind of dig through the special features on Amazing Spider-Man, they have a nod to the fact that that was almost in continuity with Avengers. So Guardians really proves that Marvel can kind of do anything. And the next movie that comes up is Avengers Age of Ultron, which will be Joss Whedon's last influence on... Well, not influence, we shouldn't say, because his influence obviously is carrying through all of this, but his sort of last direct work with the MCU.
You know a lot about this.
This is all sort of in that research I was doing. I remember reading a lot of what Whedon said afterwards. Whedon really wanted to go for a small movie because he knew he was building to what would be Infinity War. How close to that script he had originally, who knows? Someone does, I don't. He kind of got strong-armed into making a very big movie.
Yeah, City literally falls.
Yeah, literally, like, it's almost a joke, like, what they end up doing at the end of that movie. My impression from those interviews is that Whedon's not incredibly happy at this point, and that's why he leaves. He wanted to do more character development before he got to Infinity War, was basically what I remember hearing at the time. And they sort of forced him into this big actioner. And he also wanted Quicksilver to survive.
Oh.
And at the time, apparently, this is fairly consistent, even though a lot of people have denied it internally, but, like, too many things kind of popped up in this era that lead you to believe that this was the truth, that they were very resistant to having any connection to the X-Men, because they didn't know if they were getting that back. This is where you start to see the X-Men get downplayed in the comics. They were not pleased so much with Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver being there.
Well, I remember this is also when Fox was rebuilding their X-Men universe. They had things like First Class coming out.
And they had a Quicksilver running around.
Yeah, at the same time.
So this is sort of like a weird... Politicized is correct. I don't think so. It's more of an economic decision as opposed to an artistic decision that's affecting how the movie came out.
Yeah, and then going back to the fact that there was all these like copyright battles kind of going on. Disney/Marvel was trying to buy back like X-Men, but they didn't have all the X-Men. But they had this other thing called the Inhumans. And going back to the TV shows, they tried to introduce the Inhumans into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and they tried to do an Inhuman show. And in the comics, they even were trying to downplay the X-Men for the Inhumans. And in both cases, the Inhumans were just people with superpowers, just like mutants were.
Right.
But
they're tied to the Kree, which, we're going to get to more of the Kree. As far as, on the ground, they're not that interesting. It's a lot of the weird little details about the Inhumans that always made them kind of cool, and that's what gets dropped.
Right, that they're from the moon, they have this own, secret sect in the moon, that they're all royalty, and there's, all these castes based on their powers.
Right.
That all gets dropped for the fact that they're all just people with powers, which in itself gets dropped later on.
Ends up a lot of, weird contradictions to the TV stuff. It had started out where it was supposed to be a movie. I think it's actually one of the few movies...
They did, it was announced, but they canceled it.
Yeah, and that is already really uncommon at this point. Which leads me to believe they didn't have as much faith in it as maybe they wanted to initially. Try to be objective about what they brought. I think I contained myself on Iron Man 3 pretty well, because I've had some screaming matches about that. Inhumans was bad.
It was.
It was hard to make it 20 minutes into that first episode, and I love those characters.
It got canceled after 3 or 4 episods.
Right.
I don't remember much after the pilot, because even though they were trying to build it off of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and they were trying to build it to a movie, they all get kind of canceled almost immediately.
Right. And Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of starts to find its groove, but it's not what it was originally promised as, and that's where they lost a lot of people. It was very much marketed as Avengers the TV show, and you thought you were going to get a lot of stuff in it, and you didn't.
Yeah, it was more of a cop procedural with superpowers.
Right.
But that was going on at the same time as Age of Ultron, and this is kind of the end of all these weird things that were happening. The Inhumans kind of end here. All this, mutant X-Men stuff kind of gets dropped here. And even Joss Whedon leaves after he tries desperately to make his own character movie.
And up next is July of that year, we get Ant-Man. Originally supposed to be written and directed by Edgar Wright, who a lot of fans of Marvel Comics are also big fans of Edgar Wright.
But the problem here was that Ant-Man, if you remember, was announced in 2006, and here it's coming out in 2015.
And the weird part about that is Edgar Wright was attached to it almost that long. His script was apparently risky, and kind of...
I think it was risky for Phase 1, which is that 2008-2012 period.
After Guardians of the Galaxy, I can't imagine what would be risky. They were basically telling him that he couldn't make the movie he wanted to make, and then he told them he wasn't going to make the movie. Script gets rewritten, 3-4 times at that point?
Yeah, they keep some of his stuff. It's kind of hard to tell what is and isn't his. That train fight scene with Thomas the Tank Engine is probably his.
I know it's been pretty directly mentioned that the whole concept of the original Ant-Man and Wasp from the 60s was... Or I don't even know what era. Now it's probably the 80s, right? But I think it was originally going to be the 60s or something.
I was going to say, that seemed like his stuff. The idea of a legacy superhero.
Right. Also, I remember specifically that Joss Whedon said that was the best script ever to come through Marvel, and was yet another reason that he was not happy with them at that point.
Yeah, it kind of seems like there was probably problems overlapping with Captain America and everything too, and that's why they didn't release it in Phase 1. But I hate this movie. Because you can kind of see it's a Frankenstein script, because you see all the ideas Edgar Wright had, because he wanted a superhero heist movie. That kind of gets cut out halfway through for Iron Man 2.5.
Yeah, I agree. It feels very much like it's Iron Man again, except now everyone's little. To the extent that the bad guy is evil Ant-Man.
And even the Ant-Man technology never really gets mentioned again until Ant-Man and the Wasp.
There's a little bit, I guess, in Civil War. I don't dislike Ant-Man as much as I dislike, say, Iron Man 3. But I'd probably put it almost at the same level as Thor the Dark World, where it's so absolutely kind of paint by numbers that I don't find it offensive in any way. It's more offensive to me in knowing that Edgar Wright was supposed to be the director and have this other script.
I think that's what's so offensive to me, is so paint by numbers, and to kind of hear all these legends about what Edgar Wright wrote. That's what I find so offensive about it. They made something so boring, when apparently they had such great material.
So, but Ant-Man, now we have an Ant-Man, which is good, because he's an Avenger. We enjoy that.
For 1 month. In canon, really.
Well, And up next is Captain America Civil War, which...
kicks off Phase 3, but this is also the part where phases don't mean anything.
Yeah, phases have already kind of outgrown their usefulness. What you really get here, though, and this is where this movie is super important, is you get your apologies for Iron Man 3. You get Iron Man back, and they kind of drop him pretending that he wasn't going to be a superhero anymore. They kind of play it off as that he's like this addicted to the action.
Yeah.
Which makes sense for his character from the beginning.
Well, he's addicted and ashamed, and I think that's what plays so well into this movie that, like, I think this movie's really good for what it does.
Quite honestly, is the best Avengers movie up until this point. Well, you had Vision and Scarlet Witch in Age of Ultron. They were both just being introduced. And you didn't get to really play with the characters. You really get a sense of them in this movie more than you do in the movie that's supposed to be theirs. Captain America Civil War isn't written like it's about Captain America. It's written from the perspective that Captain America's right, which is a very interesting way to play it.
Yeah, because it's very hard to justify what Tony Stark tries to suggest. But I do see why he suggested it, and I think that's what makes this movie really cool. It's like you kind of do see both of the points of view. But how it approaches it more from a character point than like a morality point.
Right, and it allows the focus on a lot of characters who kind of have these different opinions and different viewpoints. Like I said, Captain America's not really the main character. He's just your like moral anchor for the film, which is why it is his movie, even though it's not. It's a weird thing. It's cool.
And this is also where we see the Russo brothers kind of become the house directors for Marvel Studios at this point.
Right, they become definitely the tip of the spear, if you will.
It's because now they made both The Winter Soldier and Civil War, which are both kind of like the best movies Marvel Studios put out at this point.
I would agree with that, yeah.
Even with Guardians of the Galaxy shoring it up too. And then we move on to Doctor Strange, which is where we get a bit more conventional with things again.
Yeah, it's another one where I'd kind of put it in the same class as Ant-Man, where it's like, all right, we need to get Doctor Strange on screen. I think the first half of that movie is really good, and I think once he's training, when they go into the silly stuff, you're not allowing that character to have their own identity.
Because at this point, people are kind of criticizing these movies for a lot of the characters kind of being the same, because Iron Man started out with the whole snarky hero thing. Then Ant-Man does it, and now Doctor Strange is doing it.
And Doctor Strange, another reason Doctor Strange I just don't really have much opinion on is this. It feels like the same thing as Ant-Man was, where it's sort of like, okay, now we have this character to play with, and it'll probably get interesting after that.
I do like some of the more wacky stuff, like Dormammu being in the time loop, all the interdimensional travels.
I think that stuff visually is really impressive too.
Yeah. It takes a lot from Inception.
Right.
It feels like it.
It does take a lot from Inception, a lot of the upside down, like creating reality things. That's November of 2016. And now we're on like the cycle we're used to now.
Like every 6 months, a Marvel movie.
May 15th, 2017, we get Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I am very pro Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and I know a lot of people aren't.
Oh, really? I thought I don't know. I like that movie.
I like it quite a bit. I think it really does pick up from the first one. I think you don't need to see anything else to watch it, which also makes me kind of happy with it.
Yeah, I think this because James Gunn is really attached to these characters, and like he plays to the characters. He's not playing to the world.
And also, I thought the way they introduced Ego was cool. And I also think it's the absolute best Stan Lee cameo out of any movie ever, because it's Stan Lee with the Watchers, and that's all I needed. Like that's the only, like I would sacrifice all other cameos for that cameo, because that's the position in which Stan Lee should be in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, up with the Watchers, who we got to see on screen. Which is your first little tip-off that maybe something's happening with Fox, because those are supposed to be Fantastic Four characters.
Yeah, the other thing to talk about is, like you said, like we saw the some Fantastic Four characters here, so this is kind of where we see the relationships start to get prepared somewhat.
Yeah, and there had been little things had come out in the media that were never, like, confirmed, but seemed a little too pervasive to not be real about this sort of... Now we know that this ended up being a buyout of Fox.
Yeah.
At the time, if you were paying attention, you knew something was going on.
Yeah, because they attempted to do a Fantastic Four movie a year before, and that turned out to be a massive flop.
Yeah, that could be a whole podcast in itself too, because that's a whole story of what happened with that.
But moving on, we see all this repairing relationships come to fruition, all these buying back of copyrights with Spider-Man Homecoming.
Yeah, Spider-Man Homecoming. Spider-Man had appeared in Civil War.
Which was a big deal in that movie.
It was a huge deal.
They showed that in the trailer.
Second trailer.
People freaked out. I freaked out. Seeing Spider-Man with Captain America and everything, that was another, Avengers moment. Seeing them on screen together, that was great.
There were rumors, too, about a whole situation where, like I had said before, Sony had been actively negotiating with Marvel. That had come out in the Sony email leak.
Yeah.
Where people said, oh, they didn't do it. But if you read those emails... Which, by the way, this is me talking about me having read these emails. This is not from an article. I read that email, and the first instinct I had on that was that's not them not coming to agreement. It's them not coming to agreement right now. They're clearly still talking.
Yeah.
Like I said, there had been a little bit of that during Amazing Spider-Man. I remember hearing this rumor. I could not credit it to anything, but it sticks out in my head. That they had written a draft of Civil War under the assumption that Andrew Garfield was going to come in as Spider-Man, that Iron Man was going to recruit him. And it was going to be closer to what happened in the Civil War comic where Iron Man gets Spider-Man to take off his mask in front of people. It didn't work out. They scrapped that, restructured the movie so it didn't need it, and then found out they got Spider-Man back. But apparently, Marvel Studios didn't want the other Spider-Man. They wanted their own Spider-Man, and that's where kind of that Spider-Man came into play.
Okay.
And that doesn't sound unrealistic to me. That sounds like something that would happen. So we get to Spider-Man Homecoming, where now we have an in-continuity Spider-Man.
This is also where Marvel's, the cinematic universe truly becomes his own. Because in Phase 1, it's kind of aping off of the Ultimates and, some of the original comics. But here, Spider-Man's kind of completely different. A lot of the characters are kind of completely different.
Right.
At the core the same.
You have a kid who, quite frankly, we don't know exactly what his origin is.
Yeah.
They never make it super clear. He shows up. We know that he was very young at the dawn of this superhero age and has grown up admiring Iron Man.
Yeah.
Which is very much its own thing. This is an MCU version of Spider-Man. This isn't comic book Spider-Man anymore. We created this world. This is how this works here. Right.
They don't mention Uncle Ben by name. They kind of vaguely motion at him. And because they kind of assume at this point people are familiar. The superhero craze is in full swing now. People know these characters. And they don't have to talk about Spider-Man's origins anymore.
Right. And let's be honest. Marvel Studios, Disney, however you want to see it, really avoids the uncomfortable stuff.
At this point, yeah, because the last time they do something uncomfortable is Guardians 2. Right. And that's more James Gunn playing on Peter Quill's insecurities and his weird habits and everything, rather than death and genocide and all these other things.
They really avoid the alcoholism with Iron Man, which is pretty nuts if you think about it, considering the history of the character, how important that was for a long time. That was one of the biggest character traits, and they just kind of got rid of it. They avoid the guilt that Spider-Man feels, which that's the thing that bothers me in Homecoming. I have no emotional connection to that version of Spider-Man, because to me, he just seems like Iron Man Jr., and it never quite plays right in my head. And I know that's a personal thing, and I know I shouldn't be judging the movie by that, but I just can't like that movie that much, because to me, it takes away a lot of the heart of Spider-Man.
I can see that. I think the actor they have is very charismatic and pulls me in a lot. But also what they do with New York City, because it feels like New York City. It's basically Hey Arnold, but Marvel. And I like all the variety in the cast and everything. What they do with Flash Thompson and Mary Jane. All those characters. I just like what they do, the different ideas they come up with that don't change the character. I think they leave a lot of open room to get into that. Disney doesn't like talking about anything uncomfortable. Even in Doctor Strange, who's supposed to be a massive ding-dong in the comics before he becomes the Sorcerer Supreme, isn't that big of a ding-dong in the movie. He's just kind of rude to people. which
I think
wasn't
that should be your catchphrase.
Ding dong?
A massive ding dong.
a massive ding dong. And, and like, it's interesting to see that compared to Iron Man 1, where, like, they openly admit he sells weapons, but at this point, like, they downplay all of that.
I don't know. I do struggle with Homecoming in a lot of ways. I like Flash Thompson in Homecoming a lot, actually. One of my favorite things in that movie is Flash Thompson. I don't like the MJ reveal because what's the point? Why not just have a new character if it's going to be a completely different character? And I feel the same way with Ned Leeds. Like, why name that character Ned Leeds if it's not Ned Leeds?
I can see. I'll say one other thing. I do like what they do with the Vulture in the Sinister Six, and that they use just blue collar guys stealing like superpower technology and just like doing crime with them. It just feels very authentic, and like you understand where these guys are coming from.
Yeah, I like that. I think my favorite parts of that movie are the beginning. I don't like the reveal that he's her father. It's. I know this is all contrived. I know. Like, I'm not stupid. I get that. But it was like one step too far, and I think it was because it has a lot to do, like I said, I don't have the emotional investment in that movie because of the lack of guilt that I feel Spider-Man's feeling. That's not true in Infinity War and Civil War for me. For whatever reason, there's something, I don't know if it's how it's written, I would assume so, where I feel like that's Spider-Man regardless of what happened in Homecoming. And I don't need Homecoming. Like, I don't need to watch that to get from Civil War to Infinity War and feel the way I do about Spider-Man.
Yeah, I can see that. I think this is a lot more about building out New York as like a place. Because at this point we have the Marvel Netflix show, which are in a weird limbo at this point. They're kind of canceled, but they might come back.
Yeah, it's something to do with, like, timed out agreement from what I've read.
Yeah, which are their own little thing. They get more into the darker stuff that we kind of say the movies avoid. For example, Jessica Jones and even Luke Cage. But they do scrub down a lot of the guilty aspects in Spider-Man Homecoming, and I think that's because Iron Man's still around, and he's still chastising him. Right,
and I thought that... I get there's supposed to be, like, you know, a father-son relationship there to a certain extent. But the funny part is, like I said, I just don't feel as much. There's so much distraction in that plot for me that I don't feel anything. And I could jump from Civil War to Infinity War, and it's still devastating when Spider-Man dies. And Homecoming did nothing for me outside of I thought the Vulture looked really cool, and I'm fine with the Vulture coming back.
So, moving on, we have Thor Ragnarok, which is also where they start experimenting a bit more. They see Guardians of the Galaxy did a lot of cool stuff, and they were like, let's do that again.
I love Taika Waititi. I have a huge...
What You Do in the Shadows is a great movie.
What We Do in the Shadows is insane, and absolutely justifies him directing anything as far as I'm concerned. I think what's a cool thing that gets overlooked on this is Eric Pearson and Craig Kyle and Christopher Yost,
who's a comic book writer.
Right, but I think tying this back to what I was talking about with Avengers vs. Mightiest Heroes, Craig Kyle and Christopher Yost were pretty much showrunners on that. If we had looked harder, 10 years ago, we probably would have seen where all this was going. So we get through Thor Ragnarok, mixed feelings from a lot of people. I'm pro Thor Ragnarok.
I'm very pro. I like the fact that the Celestials are kind of in it as just like a weird background costume.
And we also get Hulk. We get a lot of Hulk, which is good, because we have not gotten Hulk since Age of Ultron.
Yeah, he disappears at that point.
Right, and we find out, where he disappears to.
We also see Chris Hemsworth, actually play... This is also where we see, all these actors really play into their characters really well, and I think this is partly due to the early casting decisions.
Right.
Chris Hemsworth feels like Thor. Mark Ruffalo feels like Bruce Banner the Hulk. Chris Evans feels like Captain America. They all are very much their characters, and I think that's what thanks to the earlier from Phase 1 did.
Right. And that's important about, especially where we're going right now. Next, though, is probably as big of a Marvel film as there has been Black Panther. Finally bringing this movie that's 12 years in the making?
It was announced as part of the 2006 stuff, as an idea they could do.
It was in development in 2006, now 12 years later, which is nuts. This is what impressed me the most. Black Panther could have been that year's Ant-Man. Like, it could have been the movie where they just kind of like, all right, let's establish this guy a little more before we throw him into the next big movie. Coogler and Joe Robert Cole make sure that does not happen. They create a very complete film. They create a film that you really don't need to see anything else to watch. It has its own aesthetic. Everything about that movie stands out.
I think it's partly thanks to Killmonger, who is a great villain that centers a lot of this, and the world building they put down. Like, Wakanda looks cool, it feels cool to be around. A lot of people love this movie. I know there's a lot of backlash to that, though, as well, because people kind of see this as a boring movie. I can see that during the action scenes, but I think I think this is still a solid movie.
I don't understand the criticism on that, and let's be honest, there's a lot of politically driven criticism on Black Panther.
Yeah.
Just as there was a lot of politically driven praising. But I think if you look at it as a superhero movie and try to take away any of that, it's a heck of a lot better than most of them.
Yeah, because at this point, like you said, he only showed up in Civil War. We had no idea what this character actually was, besides he's a prince, and I think it helps build out his character a lot more.
And it's, like I said, you don't even have to see Civil War to watch. They do refer to the fact that his father just died, but you don't need more than the fact that his father just died to pick up what's going on.
Because they show him in, like, that very first scene.
Right, and you know he was the king, so that sets up the whole premise of the film, that, you know, this is about him defending the throne, essentially. And
I also think Black Panther kind of finally shows that Marvel is putting a lot of work into his villains, because for a while here, the joke was Marvel always kills off interesting villains.
And that every villain was just evil whoever.
Yeah. And this wasn't the case. Killmonger had an actual reason to fight Black Panther. Even with Spider-Man Homecoming, Vulture actually had a reason to fight Spider-Man.
Right.
Phase 3 is kind of where they work out a lot of the criticisms that have been levied at them for many, many years.
And at this point, it is many years. A decade.
Decade at this point. And
which is insane.
But yeah, Black Panther was, I wouldn't say it's my favorite film, but it's a good film.
Like I said, you know, we're always you're always fighting yourself in your emotional attachment to characters, trying to be objective. I don't think I'm capable of liking it more than the good Captain America movies. If there are bad Captain America movies, but I want to see a Captain America movie more than I want to see most characters, so that's going to affect my view of it. But I would say Black Panther, one of the best solo Marvel movies. I'd put it above all three Iron Mans without even thinking about that. And I think it's interesting. You're talking about the writers. Joe Robert Cole did an interview where he talked about, you know, would we be as receptive to Iron Man now with, like, changes in culture as we were then? And I think he has a point. I think he's, you know, he made an argument, you know, like, this is the movie that the culture has gotten to. And also Iron Man was trying to be different from the superhero movies that existed and sort of created the new direction, but that direction took us in places we didn't expect to go. And then we get to Avengers Infinity War, April 27th, 2018.
All the way 6 years later from when Thanos was originally shown in Avengers 1. I don't love this film, but I do like a lot what it does.
I do love it. It's such an intimidating undertaking. And the fact that they were able to keep that movie moving, address all those characters, none of the characters at any point feel off. Everyone is consistent with who they were.
I would say except for one, but we'll get to that.
Okay, we'll make that right. But I feel like it's so impressive how they kept the pace up on it and how much they packed into there that I love it. I'll also even go further, though I think people who have read the Infinity Gauntlet and things like that, and were seeing like where things were moving towards, might not have been as shocked at the ending. The majority of people who saw that movie were incredibly shocked at the ending.
Incredibly. Especially with Spider-Man dying.
Right, and it made it very effective.
Yeah.
But now I'm really interested to hear what character you think doesn't play well.
I don't think Peter Quill plays super well, and that's mainly because even Thanos, to a degree, because Guardians 2 kind of showed Peter Quill growing, but there was a lot of that, like, petulant, childlike Peter Quill in Infinity War, such as when he's punching Thanos, when they have Thanos brainwashed, and they're trying to get the gauntlet off of him. Meanwhile, you have Peter Quill yelling at him and punching Thanos about Gamora, which he doesn't know is dead at this point, but he kind of presumes she is, but he's not 100% sure. And he's having a meltdown over this, and I felt like that was a bit out of character.
I don't know if I totally agree with that. That would be an interesting thing to do, is actually watch Infinity War as a third Guardians of the Galaxy movie instead of thinking, because I definitely think of it more as an Avengers movie.
Yeah.
So the Guardians' presence is more fun in my head, but that would be interesting to look at, sort of go Volume 1, Volume 2, Infinity War, and see how I feel watching it like that.
It's so weird to see Peter Quill cause all this, which I guess will get brought up during Endgame. That part just feels out of character, just him freak out over that. Like, you would think you could have a picture on the bigger ball, especially when he's been leading this team of, like, misfits for a while now.
Right.
And then the only other complaint is, like, I would have liked Thanos to have thrown Gamora into the pit and then for nothing to happen, but then the movie would have just ended right then.
Yeah, I mean,
but I thought
it would have been shocking.
It would have been shocking. It would have been a cool twist, but I see why they didn't do that, because, like, if he didn't get the Soul Gem, then... Well, movie's over. Thanos didn't win. That's
also, like, my favorite part of that movie, because Return of Red Skull, like, totally caught me off guard. Well, I was so pumped.
I like that the Soul Gem decided to show itself as a Nazi.
I have a different interpretation of what happened. I think, okay, so, alright, let's get into theories before we get to the last two, because this is the time to do that. Alright, he had, I'm gonna say Cosmic Cube, because fuck everybody. He had the Cosmic Cube.
The Tesseract.
He had the Cosmic Cube, and he, like, fades away.
Yeah.
Right? I think it brought him into, like, this weirdo world that got established in Guardians of the Galaxy. And he's trying to get all this power, and that he eventually ends up, like, a slave to the Soul Gem. And now he's had time to think about things, so he's, like, less of a Nazi at this. Maybe. I don't know. I think he might get out and, like, be the Red Skull again, because that's what I hope.
I would like to see more Hugo Weaving as Red Skull.
But he's not even that. It's a different guy in the movie. He's doing an impression of Hugo Weaving.
It's a good impression.
It is. He's nailed it. Yeah, that's my interpretation of that, is, like, the danger of the Cosmic Cube got to him.
And then we get to now we're in a lull between the kind of shocking end of Infinity War, where Spider-Man's, like, half the universe is dead.
Right.
All these characters, are dead. And then we do Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah, it's a very bizarre follow-up. And this is an interesting point in this podcast, something we discovered. I have not seen Captain Marvel.
And I have not seen Ant-Man and the Wasp, but that's mainly out of my burning hatred for Ant-Man. I refuse to see any Ant-Man, like, standalone.
That's so funny. I like Ant-Man and the Wasp. I like it a lot better than the first one. In large part, it's not a huge, like, accolade, but I like it a lot better than the first one because it plays a little more off the characters than the first one does. It feels a little less sort of stale. The villain is pretty cool. You get Ghost, formerly of the Thunderbolts. But anyway, Ghost is there. Ghost is a cool concept because it plays off of what kind of, like, particle manipulation would do, so she can, like, phase through things.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a very different movie than the first one, and having the two characters there, having two heroes is a lot more fun. What it does do, and as a lot of people are asking this question, is something you wouldn't know because you haven't seen it, is, like, where does this fall? It appears at some time a little before Infinity War, and then there is a after-credit scene where you have Ant-Man go into the microverse. As he is in there is when the snap happens. And that's how he avoided it, maybe. We'll find out, I'm sure. I have a feeling a lot of that technology is going to play into Endgame.
Yeah.
Which might be why you might want to watch it.
So you'll probably begrudgingly watch Captain Marvel.
It's not begrudgingly. I'm just not super... Can I be honest here? We'll be honest here. I've heard a lot about the plot. And...
So you don't mind if I spoil it?
No, you can talk about whatever you want.
Alright.
I'm just not motivated. And it shouldn't be... People shouldn't see this as like, oh, we didn't want to see Captain Marvel. I did the same thing on Thor the Dark World. There's like a bunch of them I didn't see till they were on video. I didn't see Ant-Man and Wasp till it was on video. It's just, I wasn't super excited to start because the trailers I didn't find to be all that intriguing. And then I heard really mixed reviews from, like, everyone. Then I just sort of was like, hey, I can, spend money on something else for now. But I'm going to end up seeing it before Endgame because that's how my brain works.
You kind of have to.
Yeah.
It's not a bad movie, but I certainly didn't enjoy it either. I think it's a lot. To kind of circle it back a bit, Black Panther, as we said, kind of represents a new wave of superhero movies. So does Captain Marvel too, because for a long time, I remember with Marvel's The First Avengers, people have demanded a Black Widow movie. And that kind of faded over time as Scarlett Johansson got canceled in various ways.
That's not so true right now.
But now they're doing a Black Widow movie far past the point of anybody really caring anymore.
We'll see.
And we'll see what they do. But it seems weird they're doing a Black Widow movie. But Captain Marvel is the first female-led movie after, 11 years, 15 years at this point.
Right.
So it is important in that regard. I just did not enjoy it because I think they didn't really know what to do with Captain Marvel as a character.
Right.
And that's also a problem in the comics itself. I mentioned it a bit in the Shazam podcast we did, the Marvel podcast, because I think she's so important that people are kind of afraid to take risks with her. For example, in the movie, she has all her memories erased and she's trying to rediscover herself. But I think a good example of the problem here is that in the beginning, she's being told to keep her emotions in check so she could use her powers. Because it's like a whole Jedi thing. You gotta keep your emotions in check.
Right.
But in the very first fight scene she does against her mentor is telling her to keep her emotions in check, she gets angry and blasts him and she wins the fight. Right. So it kind of goes against like what the movie is trying to tell you to what it's actually doing.
Right.
Like, I think it would have been better if she's trying to keep her emotions in check. She feels like, oh, I feel powerful, but then she kind of, like, pulls back. And then she does, like, a weaker blast or something. And then in the end, she lets all her emotions out. Because I think, in a way, it would have been a good... Women talk about a lot about being condescended to and they're being talked over. And I think that would have been a good representation of that in a superhero way.
Right.
But that's not what happened. Most of the time, she's just saying all these snarky one-liners to Nick Fury, then her mentor, and then the villain, and then the Kree, and then the Skrull, and it's just... You don't get a good grasp on her character.
Well, this would be a question I ask, actually. Because I could ask you this. Do you feel like that's the same sort of attitude that's keeping the guilt out of Spider-Man and the alcoholism out of Iron Man, where it's them looking at it where... Instead of building to this big, like, revelatory moment, everything is kind of the ideal way to start. Like, she can unleash her emotions right away.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily true with, like... I think it's partly because they have to find a way to keep these stories going on for a while now. So they don't want to introduce too much into the first movie, because you would try to resolve it in the movie you introduce it in. But,
which, of course, is the problem where, for years, sequels weren't very good because you took care of everything.
Yeah.
So there is an argument for it.
Because they could introduce Iron Man's alcoholism in, like, Endgame or something. We don't quite know yet.
Yeah, I mean,
but
he'd probably be dead, but...
It'd be far past the point of, like, I do see that, is that they're, like, cleaning these heroes up into, like, a more ideal way, and they don't want to introduce too much dirt into them.
Which I think is a little ironic, because we're dealing with Marvel here, whose whole aesthetic was originally the fact that they weren't the squeaky clean superheroes.
And now it's kind of flipped in the movies.
Right.
Like, DC wants to be the gritty one. But now
DC's been the gritty one for a long time. That's a whole separate thing, too. Like, that became sort of a misconception, because DC was really doing a lot of that darker work, 30 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of started off with, like, well, that's another podcast. That's another podcast. But I don't really see that, like, problem in, like, Iron Man. I see it, the problem with, like, Iron Man in these movies is that he comes off a lot as, like, a ding-dong in these movies. He's almost always wrong.
Right.
And that's interesting, and it's kind of tiring to always see him so wrong all the time, and you want him to get better, but at the same time you don't, because he is just so stubborn.
Right, and you need, like, that becomes sort of the emotional anchor for him, is that it's very much presented in Civil War that he's struggling with this too, and he kind of doesn't know what to do except for be a dick.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, you see why he's doing it, but it's also like, he should know better at this point, because we've kind of been following him on this journey. But if Marvel's trying to make a statement about that, they're not doing very well either. It's a weird, like, where the problem of these movies kind of come clear is that, like, it's hard to do these storylines across multiple years.
Right. I think he's a little bit more conscientious in Infinity War. I think he's really using his snark to distract. the villains. And I think he is trying to think of things, but that's how he interacts with people, which is what they've established. So, Endgame is going to come out. We don't know what happens. We don't have any inside line here. What do you think happens?
Well, I think Robert Downey would want to give up the role of Iron Man, but I do think Iron Man would die. And that would probably be his big redemption arc. I don't know if Captain America is going to die. I kind of doubt it. But I could see that being a possibility too. Kind of like a callback to Civil War in that moment where like Iron Man's suit is broken and the shield's broken and they both decide to sacrifice themselves. Like they finally agree on one thing, and that's to defeat Thanos.
Right. I think that's actually probably pretty... I'm kind of with you in that I'm not sure about Captain America. I think Iron Man's dead. I can't imagine that you call something the Infinity Saga, start it with a character, and don't end it with a character.
Yeah, that seems the most logical, but then Marvel and Disney do take risk. Though.
Right.
But in very, like, unpredictable ways. Like, them killing off Spider-Man was a very risky thing to do, but they did it. Kind of. Because we know he comes back.
Which is this whole question, too, is, like, we have a lot of, superhero tech in play. We have magic. We have all sorts of stuff going on. I think trying to get a specific... Like, a lot of videos right now on YouTube that'll probably, like, pop up under this if you click on it are going to have all these, like, really specific theories of what happens. I don't even think we shouldn't even get into that, because it doesn't matter. They're going to find a way. There's a shot Captain America survives. I think it's a better shot he dies, just because you have other Captain Americas to play with, and we know some of these people are coming back.
Yeah.
I think there's a good shot that he does die, and for, like, a few years there's no Captain America, and then one of probably either Falcon or Bucky end up Cap.
I could see that, because I think that's the most logical way to end it, is that Captain America and Iron Man die, because they have represented this Marvel Universe for quite some time, going back to Civil War and Winter Soldier. Like, they kind of established this whole Marvel Studio brand.
I also have this feeling that Hawkeye's dead.
Yeah, but...
No, because that's the thing. Everyone acts like that. Everyone acts like that, but Hawkeye's a cool character. And what you do at that point is you then, like, establish that Hawkeye would be, like, a legend in the Marvel Universe at that point. If he died fighting Thanos and was one of the original Avengers.
That'd be really cool, yeah. If he's the one that dies fighting Thanos.
But this is where we enter, like, the thing is, like, and any other specific theories you have?
I was going to say I was hoping to see Adam Strange or something, but that's out the window.
You mean Adam Warlock.
Adam Warlock.
I'd love to see Adam Strange. That'd be weird.
That's out the window at this point. What I do think might happen is that we'll see something with, like, I hope Fantastic Four. Like, they might get involved somehow.
No, what's funny is everyone is split on that, and I just had this conversation with Chris Arturi from 30 Knapp Road Haunted House, who's appeared on many of the stuff, is a good friend of mine.
Shoutouts.
Get ready. When we get closer to Halloween, that's all you're going to hear. We were talking about this, and everyone is really split on that, where everyone's kind of either leaning Fantastic Four Galactus or mutants. I'm leaning mutants. I'll say that. I think we're going to get something where, like, whatever they do to put things back in order, we're going to come back to Earth and we're going to see, like, Congress talking about mutation.
I can see that, because I don't think, like, mutants are going to start appearing for, like, another year or two, because we have Dark Phoenix this summer, and that's the only reason I don't think mutants are showing up. We might get a
to not confuse brands, which they're concerned with.
Now that Disney owns Fox and thus the X-Men.
But I think they wouldn't confuse brands. That's the funny part. I think, like we were talking about how tied to this internet culture things are, I think people know. And I think they could say anything.
Well, the people that care know. Because there's a lot of people that just don't care. And they just go see these movies.
But if they don't care, they're not going to care then. Alright, so we both kind of, like, hashed out that a little bit. We do know a little bit about where this is going. We get Spider-Man, which already has a trailer, which has Nick Fury in it, and Spider-Man, both of whom are supposed to be dead.
Disney and Marvel know people analyze these trailers. For example, in the Thor Ragnarok trailers, Thor is on the Rainbow Bridge fighting off the bad guys.
Right.
And in that point, in that trailer, they show him with the hammer and with both eyes.
Right.
But in the movie, He only has one eye, and he has the axe.
So you're going no Nick Fury in this movie?
No, I didn't say that, but I am saying they have a history of editing the trailers.
Okay. They did it with Star Wars as well?
Yeah, where they make sure, like, stuff is out of the trailers, and they just, like, edit over it.
Okay, so let's say that, like, that trailer might not be completely valid, but definitely Spider-Man is in that movie.
Yeah. Yeah, it has to be.
So we get Mysterio, who, in that trailer, seems to be trying to take the role of the hero. The top hero in the world.
You know what my spicy take? I think he's using magic. I don't think he's faking it.
You don't think he's faking it?
I think he's stealing something from, like, Doctor Strange or something.
That's very, like, Bendis era Ultimate Spider-Man, where it's like, we're going to turn this around on you. Yeah. You might be right. I actually don't doubt that. That's kind of a cool idea. But what I think the tip-off in that is, though, is that the Avengers don't exist anymore. We have Spider-Man operating as some kind of agent, and this guy showing up because there aren't Avengers around. That's my theory, and I think that's the only thing I can draw from, and that leads me to believe that Captain America and Iron Man are dead, the Avengers disband, and maybe that teases, like, Thunderbolts or Dark Avengers or something, like, in that milieu. Because there is that
Dark Reign with Norman Osborn and S.H.I.E.L.D., that'd be great.
There is that rumor that's why we haven't seen Zemo since Civil War. Yeah, he's out there.
He's somewhere.
He can turn into Citizen V. And they're making a Citizen V action figure, and those Marvel Legends figures have been a decent indication of things that are coming out.
That's something we didn't mention in the Civil War movies, that Zemo was a cool character.
Oh yeah, he's a super cool character that completely disappears afterwards. But maybe he hasn't.
Maybe.
What else do we have? We have a vague idea of a Black Panther 2, but the truth is that could be Shuri.
Yeah, that could be anything. Because they have been pushing Shuri in the comics, but that's not always an indication of what will come. What would probably tip me off more is if we have a clearer idea of what Netflix and Marvel is doing with their stuff, because they have tried to tie that in, especially Jessica Jones and Luke Cage being so popular with their brands. And Daredevil being pretty good.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to get something eventually.
Because there's so much going on in New York here that I think it's kind of hard to speculate a lot on, like, what Spider-Man does. Another theory I have is that maybe we'll see somebody like Kamala Khan in the movies because she's so often in all this promotional stuff now.
And there had been a lot of rumors about Ironheart, that they were already talking about something with it, which both would tie into the idea of Iron Man being dead.
Maybe the movies will pull it off, but Ironheart is a contentious figure, to say the least.
I've heard the new book is good, though. I haven't read it.
I read the first issue from, like, 6 months ago. They probably did a new book.
Oh, that's new number one already. So what else is that? I'm trying to think what's still been officially... So Shang-Chi, which, let's see,
2006.
Spoken about in 2006, Shang-Chi is apparently happening. I have heard very little about that.
That's probably tied with the Iron Fist stuff.
Well, that would be interesting if that's where they kind of take Daredevil and Luke Cage and all those characters end up showing up. Black Widow, which the one thing that's come out that's kind of interesting is that they're casting a younger female character who's going to be prominent in the film. I'm thinking it's going to be Yelena Belova, the second Black Widow, the blonde. And they're going to introduce that character, so if they need to move Scarlet along or she doesn't want to do it anymore, we have another Black Widow around.
Yeah.
That would be my guess. And that would also make a lot of sense, because if you're going to have a spy movie with her, probably digging into her past, you could have someone else from the program. You could have something like that. And the one thing we're largely have really been talking about when we're talking about what has been announced is there's also got to be some kind of anchor to this next saga or whatever. Yeah. That's how they work. I'm almost positive, whether it be Galactus or it be... There were some rumors about Namor.
I don't think Namor could anchor an entire saga.
Yeah, but you would then have, like, underwater villains or something. You know, you'd have, like, some kind of huge threat coming after them that's going to lead to other things.
I think it would have to be space stuff.
I think it has to be space stuff, too, pretty much. Unless it's mutation.
Then we get to do the Dark Phoenix saga again and screw it up again.
Or we could do Apocalypse again.
Screw it up again.
Or we could do Age of Apocalypse, which we have not done.
Oh, Age of Apocalypse would be fun, actually.
But yeah, there's a lot of possibilities, but I think that's pretty much it. Right?
There's a lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff. So we're going to have a lot of fun going to Endgame. Maybe we'll do something short right after Endgame.
Yeah.
As like a little follow-up to this. One thing we forgot last time. We are all over social media. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Vero. I'm not even kidding. So I follow Zack Snyder news. There's like Zack Snyder's communities on Vero, if you didn't know that.
I did not know that.
We're on Twitter. If you look for Dissecting Fiction on pretty much any of those platforms, you'll find us. Type us into Google. You'll find us. The one big one that we totally forgot last time is a lot of you are listening to this on YouTube. That's our biggest market. Not market.
Platform.
We don't make any money. Platform. There you go. This is why I have an English degree. Like, share, do everything on there. That's the place where most of you watch us, and I want to thank everyone for being really cool about listening to this show. We got a lot of full listens. That number's a little lower than it is in real life because I read about how YouTube works, and some of you who went from our site to YouTube probably didn't get counted, but that's okay. We know you're out there.
Yeah, just make sure, we do want to hear your thoughts about this. What are your theories about Endgame, if you have any, or even what your takes are on some of these movies, because the Marvel Cinematic Universe it's a cultural landmark at this point.
You'll probably hear from us a little bit after Endgame would probably be our next one. Maybe a little earlier than that. We'll see what happens.
We might do a podcast on that.
Yeah, maybe we'll end up doing a podcast on Endgame itself. Hey, if you want to hear that, let us know. But thanks, and that's it for this time.